Hello everyone, my name is Teddybear and welcome back to another video. You probably noticed that I haven't really uploaded in like a while again because, well, let me be real honest, my house is usually busy, I don't really get that much time to record or any like quiet time like right now, and I have the fan on because it is really warm and yeah. Anyway, so the main reason with the video is I'm going to be making a Salmon Run tier list. Well, I've already done it, but these are my opinions, so you can definitely tell there's a lot of weapons that are like actually surprisingly high in the tier list compared to the ones at the bottom. And some of you might say like, no, the Dynamo and Ink Rush are S tier, Sploosh 52 gallon flings are like F tier. This is my opinion. So the reason why is because some of these weapons can be sometimes favoritism, but it's also because they work quite well in Salmon Run. And yeah, I guess you could say there's a bit of favoritism, but this is mostly my opinion, so this is not really what everyone would think the same. I wouldn't be too surprised if someone has the same opinion as this. Okay, but cool. Okay, it might be a coincidence anyways. So anyways, starting off in S tier. So in S tier we have the Splooshomatic, Splash Shot Jr., Aerospray, 52 Gal, 96 Gal, Lunar Blaster, Flings of Roller, Tri-Slosher, blah blah blah. Behind the tier maker, which I don't know why the sign has to be on top of the tier list, is the Dapper Doolies, Splat Brawler, including the Grisgo weapons as well, because yeah, the Grisgo weapons, because well, it's Salmon Run, of course, so they include in the list, is the Grisgo Blaster in S tier. So the reason why they're S tier is because, okay, let me just explain it really quickly. So the weapons in S tier are the weapons I find them pretty good against group salmons and heavy HP salmons. Of course, they mostly have lack of range, but when you're on the high ground, you don't have to really worry about range as much, because you're going to be dealing a lot of salmons. So if you get overwhelmed in like a high tide game, you will get overwhelmed with a long range weapon like Jet Squelch isn't going to help much with the range. Plus it runs out ink quite fast, which is why it's like B tier. But compared to the Sploosh, it shreds things, and you're very controllable, and you can shoot quite long with it as well. Of course, there's some other weapons that have like different weaknesses and strengths compared to the Splooshomatic, like the Lunar Blaster and blah blah blah. It's because they're good in their own ways, which is my opinion and why they're in S tier. And then in A tier, we have weapons that are probably almost as good as S tier, but they have a little bit more weakness. Like for example, the Splashomatic, Splash Shot, and NZAP are like 52 Gal. It's like the 52 Gal, but you require to put more shots onto your targets. They don't do nearly as much damage as heavy HP targets, but they still can shred them really quickly. Which is why the 52 Gal is like S tier, and same with the 96 Gal. Who would have thought a mid-liner can shred co-ops really quickly? Like, they could take out a Drizzler in one attempt, unlike the Splash Pro and Dually Squashes that are on B tier that doesn't. And also the groups are not too bad against the 96 Gal, so which is why it's like S tier. Plus it's rapid and it has a good amount of range. So yeah, that's why. So yeah, in A tier, it's like S tier weapons, but they have a little bit more weakness, such as like the Afterbrush has a little bit more ink consumption issues. The charges, you have to charge and you need more space, like especially the Bamboozler. Even though it charges really fast, but it doesn't have as much PS, or doesn't even have any PS, but you do have collateral damage. But it has really good range options. And then B tier, it's like they have about the same amount of downsides as A tier, but the thing is they don't have nearly as much good side or upside as A tier. It's either they're a bit slow, or just, well, probably run out ink really quickly, like the Splasher Pro. Of course it's very accurate, but the accuracy doesn't really matter much, which is why the Aerospray is like S tier in my opinion. So like, range and accuracy does not really matter. It's nice to have, but it's mostly good for like normal game. In Salmon Run, it wouldn't really matter really that much. Which is why the 52 Gal is S tier compared to the NZAP and Splash Shot, which have more accuracy. But the 52 Gal is S tier instead because, well, it does more damage. Because, you know, the bullet size, the reduced size nerf, remember, Splatoon 1 stuff, yeah. So that's why the B tier weapon, that's the difference between A tier and B tier weapons. B tier, about the same amount of downside as A tier, but don't have as much upside as A tiers. Like, A tier has about as much okay, it's kind of hard to say. So S tier has mostly upside, A tier has really good upsides as well, but has a little downside. to them. B tier has a little downside to it, but not nearly as good as A tier. C tier has more downside and just as good as B tier. D tier is probably even worse. Like, when I say worse, I mean like there's a little upside, but mostly downside. But there's still a little chance for them. And then the E tier is like there's very little upside and mostly downside. And then F tier, there's like not really much upside, just mostly downside. And this is my opinion, so don't hate on me just because this is someone else's opinion and this is not your opinion. If you want to make this, just search up this tier maker. It's not that difficult. You just need a computer, search up tier maker on Google, then there you go. You have tier maker. It's really easy. So yeah. Anyway, so S tier. I kind of want to make this video a bit short, but it might be long because of well, there's loads of weapons. So main reason, so Splatoon kills a lot of players. Really, players mean salmons, and does a lot of damage. But of course, the issue it has is accuracy and range. But if you're on the high ground, range wouldn't really be much of an issue. Or if it's like a stinger, like, of course you have a lot of mobility, so you can travel to a distance like really quickly, which makes up for it. Junior Aerospray are like that, but they kill salmons a little bit slower, but they have a little bit more range. 52 Gal has a little bit more accuracy, but mostly does a lot of damage, but shoots slower, and doesn't paint nearly as good. Same goes for 96 Gal, but does even more damage, shoots even slower, and shoots further. The Lunar Blaster has a lot of end lag compared to the others, but has really good single target, like one-shot damage, like really good against groups. Fling's a roller. You have vertical fling for like taking out the steel head in one hit, which you can do. Dynamo you can, but it's slower on the dynamo, and you can have a little bit more space. But I find fling's a roller better because it plays like splat roller, but also can take out a steel head in one go. And also the vertical fling does more damage. And you're more mobile while you're moving around, and your ink consumption is pretty decent. And then the Tri-Slosher, well, obviously you just spam. The Tri-Slosher, you just spam ZR, and you do a lot of group damage. A bit meh on the single targets, but hey, it's got some decent range. It's just you need to avoid being on the high ground because you're going to do less damage to your targets that are below you, which sounds like it's a good thing, but it's actually not because you're going to do less damage when you're higher. Same goes for the Slosher. But yeah, Tri-Slosher is better because it does a little bit more damage faster. And then the Blob Bobber is S tier as well, is because it flings like 4 projectiles at once, making up the group damage. Which Slosher Machine is like 1 projectile, Blob Bobber is like 4 times as much. And yeah, it takes out stingers really quickly. I'm starting to sound like I'm making no sense, but you get what I'm talking about if you know what Salmon Run is, and you know the bosses and weapons. So I'm not going to really explain it because I just want to get through this quickly because, well, yeah, don't really have much to say besides, yeah, making this video, because I've uploaded in a while. Anyways, Dapper Doolies, same thing with Sploosh, but you can dodge roll, and you have a little bit more range, but you don't do nearly as much damage because you do 36 damage per shot instead of 38. Splat Roller, you can have a shield for in-close interactions if you're about to get hit by, like, a massive amount of salmons, but then you can use your base attack to, like, take out tougher enemies and stuff, which is why it's ST as well. And Grizzly Blaster, just hold down ZR. It's like a shooter, but with blast radius, that's why. But the thing is, it doesn't paint nearly as much, and it's weaker than the Clash Blaster, but it's better because, well, it does more damage because it shoots faster, and it does shoot further. So yeah, those are the S tier weapons. So next up, A tier. In A tier, we have the Splash-O-Matic, Splash Shot, NZAP A5, Blaster, Range Blaster, L3, Carbon, Splat Roller, Octobrush, Classic Squiffer, Bamboozler, Mini, Heavy, Nautilus, and Splat Doolies. Of course, I said some of them their full name or short name because, well, yeah, just get through things quicker. Because, well, I don't know, just nicknames. So the reason why Splash-O-Matic, Splash Shot, and NZAP are A tier, of course they do about the same amount of damage as the Splash Junior. But the thing is that the Splash Junior, it's kind of hard to say, but the Splash Junior paints better and you're more mobile than the Splash-O-Matic and NZAP just by a little bit. And plus, it's probably got a slightly bigger bullet size than those two weapons. And also, it shoots a lot longer, lasts longer, which is why, of course, it's very little difference. And with the Splash-O-Matic, it's kind of meh against small fries, because you need to, like, actually hit your, put your aim on towards them, because the bullet size is quite smallish on the Splash-O-Matic, I assume. And then with the Splash Shot as a 3-shot shooter, you still have to put 2 shots on the small fries. But the funny thing is, the Gloogadoolies and the Daffodoolies that does 36 damage with a neutral damage can one-shot small fries, just having 1 extra damage, which I like to assume small fries only have 36 HP, which is why they get one-shot by Gloogas and Dapples. But with the Splash Shot, it's a 2-shot because you're missing out 1 damage, because it does 35 damage, the others do 36, so which makes sense. NZAP, you do have a lot of mobility, good range, good painting, but you do run out in quite fast, and you do about the same damage to Splash Junior and Splash-O-Matic. So yeah, I mean, these, I guess I don't really have much worse to say, but so anyway, so next, Blaster and Range Blaster. Of course, you might put them even lower because, like, well, yeah, they have end lag and they can get cock blocked if an enemy's in your way. Also, I forgot to tell something. So some weapons do more damage in Salmon Run, like the L3 requires 3 hits on the chum instead of 4, H3 requires 2 on the chum, and some weapons can shoot a lot longer, like the Brellas can shoot a lot longer, Charges do a lot more damage, and Blasters can shoot a lot longer as well, and Slashers do more damage as well. So yeah, and then some weapons remained unchanged, like Rollers and Brushes, for example, and same goes for Shooters and Dualies as well. Yeah. Okay, continue. The main reason why the Blaster and Range Blaster are in A tier instead of being like lower like C or D is because they can shoot a lot longer. Compared to normal game, if they would have normal game in consumption, they would be lower. Same goes for the Luna, or every other Blaster pretty much. But they shoot longer. L3 is A tier because if you spam ZR, you do a lot of damage. It's not 4 hits on the chum, it actually does more damage in Salmon Run, so which is why it's like A tier. The reason it's A tier because you have to spam ZR, and you do have to aim, and yeah, that's all I can say, which is, but it's still pretty good. Common Roller, lack of range, little lack of damage, but you still have a lot of mobility on the weapon. I just find Tri-Slosh a little bit better, anyways. And then Splat Roller, it's like Fling's a roller, but without the powerful vertical fling. That's pretty much all I can say with the Splat Roller. The Octobrush is up here, it's because, I mean, it would have been the best if it had more ink consumption. But since its ink consumption is mediocre like the Splasher Pros, but it's a little higher because it does more damage, because it's Slayer, Splasher Pros is a midliner, then yeah, the Octobrush is like A tier. Squiff is A tier because you need to charge and time it quickly, but the reason why it's like the best charger alongside with the Bamboozler is because they both charge really fast and do a lot of damage quicker, but the Bamboozler has a little lack of piercing, but the range and the charge speed, and the tap firing even, really helps it out, because charges do a lot more damage in Salmon Run. But with the Squiffer, you can have full charge shots to one-shot your enemies quicker, even though you don't have as much range or charge fast, or you're not as mobile, and you can't charge nearly as much shots compared to the Bamboozler, but you still can charge pretty fast and do a lot of damage quicker. The Mini Splatling is because you charge really fast and you're very mobile. Heavy Splatling, it's like slower, but you have a longer duration to make up for it. Nautilus, I mean, to be honest, a little bit of favoritism, I like it, but also because it plays similar to the Heavy and Mini as well. It's like in between, but with a slower charge speed. And you have the swim mechanic, and you can recharge, which is why it's A tier. And Splat Dualies, because it's like the NZAP pretty much, but without the faster mobility, but you have more accuracy. But your bullet size is smaller, just like the Splash-O-Matic. A lot of words for A tier because there's a lot of weapons. Next up, B tier. In B tier, we have the Splasher Pro, Jet Squelcher, Rapid Blaster, H3 Nozzlenose, Goo Tuber, Slosher, Egg Splasher, Ballpoint Spatling, Gloogadoolies, Dually Squelchers, Tetra Dualies, Undercover Brella, and the Grizzgo Brella. Okay, main reason why the Splasher Pro is in B tier is because lack of ink consumption and painting, which is all it has. And also its killing times are a little slow, but it's actually pretty much okay. The range and accuracy is pretty good, but you don't really need it necessary. It's more like it's good for like longer range situations, but I like using the weapons that do a lot more damage, because if you have the high ground, range doesn't really matter really much. Some weapons do have more range, like the Nice Scout, of course, but it does a lot more damage. It does 62 damage, and 62 makes a big difference in Salmon Run compared to 42 or 52. So, which is why the Nice Scout is like S tier as well. So yeah, and Jet Squelcher is B tier as well. It's got a little bit more mobility, a little bit more painting, and it's got more range than the Splasher Pro, and it kills chums the same speed as the Splasher Pro. 3 shots them, both of them, with the same fire rate. But the Jet Squelch is slightly more worse on the single targets like Coax or Steelheads or Steel Eel Drivers or Scrappers. Unlike the Splasher Pro, does a little bit more damage, but the Splasher Pro runs out ink really fast and paints a little bit more worse. So, which is why I put the Jet Squelcher in B tier as well. The Rapid Blaster is in B tier because its killing time is like similar to the Jet Squelcher, but of course it does a lot more damage with like the one shots, obviously, and it's got less range. But it plays similar to the Jet Squelcher, but of course it's got much less range than the Jet Squelcher. So, which is why it's B tier. Okay, so the weird thing is that I put the Gootuber. So the main reason why the Gootuber is in B tier and you see the Spike Charge and Spike Scope in C tier is because the tap firing on the Gootuber is better. Plus, you can conserve a little bit more ink and you can do more shots with the Gootuber than the Spike Charger and Spike Scope. Even though it charges slower, which could be the issue, but you're a lot more controllable on the charge, and you don't really need to do a full charge shot to do enough damage onto a specific enemy. Because, well, you know, normal game, it does over 100 damage instantly. Because without that, Gootuber, it sucks a lot. Straight out from the waters. Okay, that does not really make sense, but, like, you know what I'm talking about. The Gootuber would suck if it didn't have that mechanic. So, which is why it's in beta, because the tap firing is just a little bit better. But, of course, the charges, you do full charge shots. But I find it alright with the Gootuber. I'm just more experienced with the weapon, which is why. Slosher's in B tier. It's because it's like Tri-Slosher, but you have more range, a little bit more damage, but you fling a lot slower. But it's the reason it's in B tier is because, well, it's quite slow taking out tougher salmons like Steelheads, Coax, Steel Eel Drivers, and even the Stingers, which Sloshers, most of them are pretty slow, especially the Slosher Machine, and Rollers as well. They are slow as well. Like, Rollers and Sloshers are, like, probably the worst weapons to deal with Stingers. Alright, a little quick clip right here. So, the X-Boss is actually surprisingly good with the against the Stingers. I forgot to mention it in the video, but with the Slosher, Tri-Slosher, and Slosher Machine, you have to fling each time to take out one part each. The X-Boss, you only have to fling 2 times. It's like a blaster. And the Blobblobber has 4 projectiles at once, so it makes it a little bit better overall as well. So, yeah, the only 2 Sloshers are actually quite decent against Stingers is the X-Splosher and the Blobblobber. Anyways, continue on with the video. Charges as well, but if you do like a slight charge and time it perfectly and you do it really quickly, then yeah, you can take them out really quickly. So, yeah. So, the reason why Slosher's in B tier is because it's got really good group damage and decent range, but it's a bit slowish on the single targets and stuffs. The X-Washer is the same thing, but it can take out fly fishers with each of its flings, so you don't have to spend a lot of time charging your ink tank to throw a bomb twice. The X-Washer saves so much time with just flinging twice, because its attacks are explosions, which is why. And the other thing it's good is that its pierce is pretty good. But when it comes to single targets, it's quite awkward. The explosions do not really insta-kill the chums. It's good against small fries, because the explosions do take out the small fries, just not the chums. Which is why you have to do a direct shot on them. And if you do a direct shot but not the splash damage, you're going to do very little damage on the X-Splasher, which is why it's B tier as well. Next is the ballpoint spatling. The reason why it's in B tier is because it does have really good duration, and it does charge a little bit slower than the heavy. Of course, it's got close range mode, but then you're going to keep charging your weapon a lot, which can be kind of irritating. And it does have RNG. Of course, it sounds like I'm kind of killing the point why I'm putting the closer range weapons in the top spots compared to the longer range ones. Well, with the ballpoint spatling, most of your duration is, well, it doesn't do nearly as much damage as the Mega Heavy Nautilus, which is why it's a little bit lower, which is why. And also you're a bit slow when you're moving around, and you paint pretty bad with long range mode. So yeah, it's kind of funny how a lot of people think this weapon's OP. In my opinion, I don't really find it OP, to be honest. Especially when it's got a lot of nerfs. It got, in version 5.2, it got 4 nerfs all at once. Even though they're quite smallish, it's still quite a noticeable difference on the ballpoint. Like, having a weapon being nerfed that much in one update, or in multiple updates, and one of them has 4 in one update, yeah. kind of brutal, but it makes sense because, yeah, the bullet splattering is still pretty good. Obviously, it's just it's not OP as it used to be. So, which is why. So the main reason why is because the bullet splattering, you want to use all your duration. And you do want to use its long range mode a lot. Of course, I'm more like a group damage killer slaying machine, more of a player, rather than the, like, take out salmons from the distance kind of player. It's because why you need range over damage. Like, you want to take out the salmons quicker, which is why. Anyway, so next is the Gluggers. The reason why Gluggers is in B tier, I was thinking of it being A tier, but then that would be a little too much to think that the Gluggers could be that good, in my opinion. It's because I use the weapon a lot. It's my most favorite duels out of all the dualies. But it's just probably as bad as the dualie squelchers or Tetris, or good, I guess you could say. Because B tier weapons are still pretty good, regardless, in my opinion. So the reason why the Glugger dualies is in B tier is because its neutral mode's damage is not really that great, and its painting as well. And it does have a bit of RNG, but the RNG is not really the main reason. It's actually its damage and its painting power. But when you dodge roll, it can one-shot the Stinger's pots as well. Just like the Nicest Scout, which is also the reason why it's in S tier as well. So yeah, my opinion, again, of course I keep saying it over and over again. But of course that means you're going to be dodge rolling a lot just to make it a little bit stronger. So, and also it requires some space because it does dodge roll quite far. So it can be pretty tight, and it still paints pretty bad with its neutral mode. But anyways, besides that, but the Gluggers are still pretty good. Just not nearly as good as the higher weapons, which is why. Next is Dualie Squelchers. Its neutral damage is slightly better than the Gluggers when it comes to range, painting, and its mobility as well when you dodge roll. But the problem is it doesn't do nearly as much damage as the Gluggers turret mode. It's because when you dodge roll, you don't get really that much benefit besides getting bigger bullet size because it got nerfed where its neutral bullets are smaller. But it's not really matter because, I mean, its accuracy is like average with its like smallish bullet size, which it has got recently. And when you dodge roll, you make it more accurate. Plus, you're only using the dodge rolls just to move around a lot, so which is why it's B tier. Not really much to say with the Dualie Squelchers. Tetris Dualies has a lot of RNG, and it's actually quite noticeable because it's got range, obviously. So, which is why it's like B tier. But when you dodge roll, it becomes like a longer range end zap. But the thing is, when you dodge roll, you have a lot of end lag of trying to move out from the spot. Just like the Gluggers, but it might be a little bit longer than Tetris, especially when the Tetris is slightly lighter than the Gluggers, obviously. And you can dodge roll about up to 4 times, which is quite handy, just to make up for its end lag at the end after each dodge rolling, obviously. So, yeah. Also don't really have much to say, but it's pretty much the same situation as the Gluggers, where neutral mode is not really that good, but turret mode is pretty good to make it up for it. Next up, Undercover Brella is B tier. Its PS is pretty bad. Its damage is pretty good, because Brellas do a lot more damage than Salmon Run, and Undercover Brellas is actually quite, like, similar to the Splat Brellas, but you can hold down the ZR. But it doesn't have nearly as much collateral damage as the Splat Brella, because it doesn't have as much bullets as the Splat Brella, which is why the Splat Brella probably does more damage. Sometimes. Anyway, so with the Undercover Brella, the reason why it's B tier is because it's good against small fries, which is the main reason why, and it's good for like co-arc single targets pretty much. But it's pretty bad against groups, which is why it's in B tier. Its range is decent, its swimming ability is pretty fast as well. It is one of the lightest weapons, even though it doesn't really act like a lightweight weapon with the way you're using the weapon, but it is a lightweight weapon regardless. If you undercover mains didn't know, you actually have the fastest swim speed in the game, along with other swim speed weapons. So yeah, which is why it's B tier. And then the Grizzco Brella is because it runs out in quite fast, but it shoots really fast. It's really good for groups, but it's quite meh against like single targets, co-ops, steel eel drivers, steel heads. Like if you're in the distance, you're doing less damage because it's shooting multiple like propellers. Because that's why you make a lot of damage with the Brellas. It's because you do a lot more damage because they're all hitting the same target all at once. Which is why with the Grizzco Brella, which is why you do a little less damage in the distance. Its painting's pretty good, but it does run out ink really quickly, and it doesn't have a shield for it to help. It's because if you hold down ZR, it shoots faster rather than having like a range, which is why a range of a shield. It does have good range. It has the same range as the Teddybear, it just doesn't do nearly as much damage. But yeah, that's all the weapons in B tier. Next up, C tier. These ones are... There's not really as much. It's because most of the weapons in Salmon Run, in my opinion, are quite good, not gonna lie. Which you can tell between S, A, and B tier. Which I honestly do not really mind at all in the tier list. And there's some weapons a bit in the mess side in C, D, E, and F tier. Of course, there's too much tier list. Too many tiers, but oh well. Just, you know, the alphabetical order, because no one... People keep forgetting about E tier exists. It's because S tier is always the best. Replace the E with an S, yeah. That's how the alphabetical order works, apparently. In C tier, we have the Clash Blaster, Squeezer, Splat Charger, Splatoscope, Grisco Slosher, and Grisco Charger. The reason why they're all in C tier is because the Clash Blaster is decent with group damage, but its range is quite short, and its DPS is not really that good. It's not really good against single targets. Its blast radius on the partial damage is quite big, and it does do a lot of damage towards the groups. And the one thing that sucks a lot on the Clash Blaster is that it doesn't one-shot chums, because it's that weak of a blaster. But it's not the worst blaster in my opinion, because you can definitely tell the Rapid Blaster Pro is in D tier, but I'll get into that next as the next tier. So I'm in C tier first off. So yeah, the Clash Blaster, it has lack of range for its range is quite short for its damage, which is why it's in C tier. And it's a blaster, so it's got some end lag, and it probably would use a little bit more ink. But of course, I say that the blasters have more ink consumption. It's more like towards the slower weapons that have more ink consumption. With the Rapid Blaster and Rapid Blaster Pro, you don't have as much. The same goes for the Clash Blaster. It's because you have a lot of shots on those weapons, which is why. The Squeezer is in C tier. It would be in B tier if it wasn't for it to spam ZR, just to make it powerful. Because when you're lazy enough with the Squeezer, you just hold down ZR and you lose all that power. With RNG, I mean, it's good for groups, but with the tap firing, it's good for singles. But you do run out ink really quickly, and you do shoot really far, which is good. It's really accurate. Even if you jump, you don't get RNG, which is also pretty good. And also, yeah, it's just not really good with groups when you're tap firing, and it does run out ink really quickly. But with its auto-firing mode, it's not good against single targets, but it's okay against groups. Which is why it's in C tier, because it's too much effort just to make it good enough, which is why I put it in C tier. Normal game is pretty fun, not gonna lie. Then next is Splat Charge and Splatoscope. The main reason why these two are on S tier is because you're relying on the full charge shots and a lot of distance. The tap firing is okay, but they got painting. Actually, no. In Salmon Run, they don't really paint nearly as bad compared to normal game. Normal game, they just nerfed normal game charges. In Salmon Run, they kept the painting. Splat Charge and Splatoscope paint way better in paint a little bit better in Salmon Run. So a good painting option. It's just the tap firing and close interactions isn't really good. The Eviler has the same issue, but you charge even slower for even more damage, even more time, and a little bit more range. Which is why they're a tier below. But in C tier, yeah, Splat Charge and Splatoscope are a bit better, but not a whole lot, because, well, yeah, they don't one-shot nearly everything, unlike the Eilers, but obviously the Eilers are a tier lower, because I'll get into that soon. Grisco Slosher is a very debatable weapon. When I first used the weapon, it keeps running out ink so fast, which is why I put Dynamo in F tier, which I haven't said. Of course, I just said it right now, but like, that's the main reason with the Dynamo in F tier. I'll get into that. Grisco Slosher runs out ink. You only have 25%. It uses up 25% of its ink tank with only one fling. So if you throw a bomb and then one fling, that's your entire ink tank gone. Its projectile speed is pretty slow. I would put it in F tier if it didn't have like at least probably like 2 or 3 things that makes it not nearly as bad. Of course, its end lag is quite long, and you do move really slowly. You even move slower than the Slosher and X-Slosher, which is kind of surprising. Just imagine it in normal game. It'll be quite OP, to be honest. But when you put a lot of run speed, it'll be hardly any difference. Not kidding, but obviously it's a Salmon, you can't have any abilities. So the reason why the Grisco Blaster is in C tier, because obviously the end lag, the painting, sometimes the paint, but not really the painting in general. It's just how many shots you can only fling. You can only fling about 4 shots, which is half the amount of X-Sploshes in normal game. But I'm pretty sure the X-Splosher can fling a little bit more. I think. I don't know. But with the Grisco Slosher, you can only fling about 4 times. It's got a few upsides. It's got... The few upsides it has is that one is that it does a lot of damage, which is why it's in C tier. And the other reason why is because it flings really far. Oh yeah, the other downside it has is that its projectile speed is really slow. Even slower than the Bloblobbers, which is kind of funny. Even though it does not look like Bloblobbers and it does not bounce in walls. So if you fling it into a solid wall with no salmons nearby and it doesn't paint anything, you just, congratulations, you just wasted 25% of your ink tank onto nothing. But if you fling it in straight lines, you make full use out of the Slosher. And also, it can definitely whiff really easily because of the projectile speed. So you need to, like, fling ahead of time to know where this or that is going. Or you just need to get close to your opponent. Opponent, I mean salmons, because this is Salmon Run, obviously. It's you and other people against the salmons, trying to get the golden eggs, win, survive, obviously, get a quota and stuff. So, other reason is that it's got really good PS and good damage. Besides those, and also its flinging speed is the same speed as the Slosher machine, so it's not as slow as the X-Slosher. But you can't fling nearly as much as the X-Slosher, which is also another reason. But another cool thing about the Grisco Slosher is that you can take out steelheads without, because it goes through armor as well. Like, armor, like, attacks where they don't go through. The Grisco Slosher can go through. The X-Slosher would just explode on contact if it's a solid thing, which is why it doesn't really go through steelheads. But it does take out fly fishes, but it's only if you fling it in the things. The Grisco Slosher, you can just take out it's another weapon that can take out the fly fish with its main attack. But it's pretty much the same results as the the X-Slosher. But you just have to hope the fly fish doesn't move around. But of course the fly fish does not really move around a lot, so you have full benefit out of it. So, yeah, that's why the Grisco... It's a lot of explanation why it's in C tier. Next and last one, Grisco Charger. The reason it's in C tier, you can run out ink really fast. You only can charge about 8 times. It does have really good range. It's really good for groups. It's like the group damage version of the Bamboo. But the problem is, it's got really good group damage, but the problem is that you can't really do tap firing, because if you tap fire, it is a full charge shot. Which is why if you tap fire like 8 times really quickly, you run out of ink extremely fast. So it's the fastest weapon to run out of ink in Salmon Run, in the game, essentially. If it was in normal game, it would be an OP as well. It does one-shot chums, but it doesn't one-shot steelhead, so it's a bit weaker than Splat Charger, Squeezer. It's stronger than Bamboo, but weaker than the other chargers when it comes to the charge damage. And you can charge a little bit more than most of the other chargers, probably. But not as much as the Bamboo, because the Bamboo you can only charge about like... Actually, you can charge about 25 times with a weapon, by the way. Have I forgot about it? Yes, I did. Anyway, so yeah. The Grisco Charger you can only charge about 8 times. It does do a lot of damage. It's like the Grisco Slosher, but faster projectile speed. I don't know. I mean, the reason why it's in C tier as well is because it doesn't pierce through enemies like the Grisco Slosher can. But of course you can say Grisco Slosher is worse because, well, yeah, it's slower with its projectile speed, which is another reason. But nah, they're both C tier where they belong. Alright, next, D tier. Okay, on to the final 3 tiers. Next is D tier, so obviously I said already. Rapid Blaster Pro, Ela, Scope, and Hydra. The reason why they're D tier is because Rapid Blaster Pro is like the regular Rapid Blaster, but you're choosing range over DPS, mobility, and shots as well. But hey, a little bit of range is good, but it's... I don't know, but like... I kind of regret putting it in D tier, actually. Yeah, I could have just placed it in C tier. It's actually quite solid, to be honest. Let me just change it for a moment. Alright, there we go. Okay, now it looks a little bit better. I kind of underestimate the Rapid Blaster Pro. I've seen Sendo's stream, and he did pretty good, but of course it's in normal game, not Salmon Run, but like... it's actually not so bad. It's just 1 tier below, just like the L3 with the H3. So I kind of got a little too much on the Rapid Blaster Pro. It's because it's slow on kills, which is why. But, I kind of underestimated it a little too much. So yeah, the Ela, Scope, and Hydra are probably just a little bit more worse, just by a little bit, because they're slow, which is the main reason why there's a difference between C and D. So yeah, the Ela and Ela Scope are the longest range in the game. Well, with the normal one, you have more mobility, and you don't have as much range as the the scope. But the cool thing about these two weapons is that you can one-shot scrappers, which you can't do with the Splat Charge and Splatter Scope. The ones you can't one-shot with the Splat Charge and Splatter Scope, it's either a full charge and a few shots, or 2 shots required on the Splat Charge and Splatter Scope. These are the following enemies: the Steel Eel Driver, the Scrapper, Coax as well, because you need 2 shots on the Coax with Splat Charger and Splatter Scope. And yeah, I think that's and also you only have to do 2 shots on the Drizzler. The Drizzler's got the most HP to try and do a lot of damage on. Splat Charge and Splatter Scope require 3 charge shots. Squeezer as well. Goo Tube is 3 shots, so the Goo Tube is obviously the worst against Drizzlers, but it's decent. But it's better in other situations. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I went a little too hard on it. I mean, it's not good against close interactions, which is the main reason why. It uses up 25% of its ink tank with a full charge shot, just like the Grizzgo Slosher. The Grizzgo Slosher is like the Ealer, but without any midi charge shots. You just have to wing the shots, and you just follow it, because it's slow, but it actually kind of helps a little bit, because you can catch up to your shots a little bit. But yeah, the reason why the Ealer and Ealer Scope are in D tier is because they move really slow, and they're arguably the worst weapons to face against up close against salmons. Well, besides Splat Charge and Splatter Scope and Squiffer, these two weapons, the Squeezer and the Squiffer sound really similar. I got myself confused with the names back when the Squeezer was released, when in Splatoon 2, a couple of years ago and stuff. Okay, of course that doesn't have to do with the tier list, but what I'm saying is the Ealer and Ealer Scope are just as bad as Splat Charge and Splatter Scope and Squiffer with the tap firing, but you move even slow while swimming. And when you're trying to do a full charge shot to try and do more damage in the distance, it takes longer. So which is why it's in D tier. It's slightly worse, but it's got a few cool upsides. The reason why the Hydra is in D tier is because it charges really slow. It's the slowest in the game, it's a splatling, and you don't get much benefit besides having a longer duration. But when you get the time, and you perfectly timed it with a crap ton of salmons and coax, you shred the hell out of them. It would have been easily the best if it didn't charge that slow. But of course it's intentional, obviously. So yeah, which is why the Hydra's in D tier, because you don't get enough time. But you can be quite optimal. Like, the partial shots you can try and do are a little bit easier to do rather than the tap firing on the charges. But, I mean, it's D tier because you move really slow as well. So you need to be, like, quite smart with the Hydra. Okay, next is E tier. 2 weapons, and then 2 weapons in F tier. A bit funny how I would put these 2 weapons, which are way better in normal game, but in Salmon Run, in my opinion, are just not really they're not really my favourites in Salmon Run, obviously. The Slosher Machine has lack of Pierce, which is why it's an E tier. Because it's really bad, it's pretty bad against Pierce, which is why it's immediately E tier. I hope I'm not going too hard on the Slosher Machine. I mean, it's got good single target DPS, but it's awful against small fries, groups of small fries, and also it's the slowest of taking out the sting. It's the slowest Slosher to take out the Stinger, but it's okay. It's like an okay speed. It's not the worst weapon against taking out the Stinger. So yeah, that's the reason why the Slosher Machine's in E tier, because yeah, it's really, really bad with group damage. So yeah, if it wasn't that bad with group damage, like with a direct shot, you do a lot of damage, but you don't get any splash damage from it, unlike the blasters, which kind of makes it balanced for Salmon Run compared to normal game. I don't know. But of course, if you try and fling over them, then the shots would hit in between the salmons, but of course it's kind of weird. So what I'm saying is that you fling over, and you need to, like, you have to go beat the shots to try and do some, like, decent group damage. But even that, it's not really that good with its group damage. And not to mention, it's got the second slowest fling handling for Slosher, by the way. It's a bit slower than Slosher and Bloblobbers, more range than the Slosher and Tri-Slosher, but not as much as the Bloblobbers or the X-Sloshers. So yeah, the reason why it's E tier, lack of Pierce. Even though the Sloshers are supposed to be good for Pierce. I mean, the Blobber has 1 Pierce for each of the blobs, but it flings 4 projectiles at once. Plus they travel further, they bounce off walls, so they can't get cock-blocked by, like, obstacles. And it flings slightly faster, which is why it's, like, S tier. because it flings about the same speed as the slosher. The projectiles are quite divided, not like all at once. Anyway, so yeah, that's why the slosher machine is in E tier. The next thing in E tier is surprisingly the Teddybear. A lot of people like the weapon, which I definitely understand, and it's pretty good in normal game. Got a fair few nerfs, but I don't know if it affects normal game. I mean, the shield does, the canopy is affected, but the ink consumption, not really. But the reason why it's E tier is because it's slow, it runs out ink. Well, it doesn't really run out ink really fast. It's more like its mobility is pretty slow, it's pretty bad against groups, unless you have a shield. Yeah, it's one of those weapons where you want to use your shield to, like, take out groups of salmons, and it's good for, like, straight lines like Grisgo, Slosher, or Chargers. But without the shield, the weapon would be even worse. But also, its ink consumption is not so bad, but the reason why Teddybear is not good is because, well, yeah. I mean, it's got good single target damage, but it's just slow in between shots, and it's kind of hard to, like, move around and stuff, so... I mean, its mobility is slow. I mean, when I say mobility, I mean, like, how fast can you move around? It's, like, mediocre speed. So that's why it's in E tier. So, next, on to the final two. In 40 minutes of the video. It could be shorter because, of course, I might have a few dead clips, which I didn't want to be in. Didn't want it to be in the video, of course. I've been waiting for this moment. Yep, F tiers. The weapons, I find them as the worst of the worst. And there used to be a Salmon Run rotation where I had these two weapons, which I absolutely hate the rotation, because you're either forced to have one of them or having both, which is just crucial for me. But of course, they have good benefits on other modes, but when it comes to like the normal mode, or if you get overwhelmed, is when it starts to fall apart, these two weapons. So they're both are the opposite from each other, which makes them cancel each other out from being good enough to be on the higher tier, which makes them F tier. So they're not nearly as good as E tier. But so the main reason why Dynamo is an F tier, it's got good range. Its vertical fling is supposed to hit multiple salmons, or multiple targets in normal game, but in Salmon Run it only hits one or two targets. Does it only hit 2 targets with a vertical fling? But if you're right in front of the salmon, one salmon, it eats up, that salmon just takes up the entire fling. You just waste 1/5 of your ink tank. Of course, the Dynamo you can fling a little bit more than the Grisgo Slosher, but the reason why it's like F tier is because, well, it doesn't have good pierce. The piercing, you just need group damage with the horizontal fling. And you do have rolling mode, where you roll them over, of course, but of course you need to get over there. It's really slow, it does run out ink quite fast, which is why I'm putting the Dynamo in F tier. And another thing why, its end lag is so slow. Another reason why it's F tier, I absolutely hate the weapon in Salmon Run. I kind of feel like Nintendo should buff the Dynamo, but only in Salmon Run. Normal game is pretty good. Salmon Run is awful for the weapon. The weapon is awful in Salmon Run, because you're relying on the rolling your targets. Because this weapon, I like flinging it a lot with the roller, not running them over. Because if you charge a little bit of ink, which is a little less than 1/5, you're just gonna waste that little bit of extra ink after flinging, and then you're just gonna waste a lot of time as well because the end lag, and you move really slow all at the same time. And also, when you recover ink right afterwards, there's a bit delay of you trying to recover ink. So, which is why Dynamo is F tier, because it runs out ink constantly for something to do decent, which is why it's like not really my favorite. It's good for hide and seek with Goldie, but besides those, it's not really good. But of course, Salmon Run Rush, but of course, if you're endangered or run out of ink, you're dead. Like, you just don't have anything to recover with the weapon, which is why it's like not really that good in Salmon Run, in my opinion. Alright, on to the next and final F tier weapon, and the final weapon in the entire tier list. These are all my opinion, obviously, so next, the Ink Rush. The reason why the Ink Rush is F tier as well is because it's got lack of range. It's supposed to be S tier on what it's supposed to be. It's a Slayer, but it's awful with damage. And also you have to spam ZR a lot just to get the full amount of damage out of the Ink Brush. And its damage output is about the same as the Octobrush, but you have less range. And you could possibly, I mean, you don't run out of ink as much as the Octobrush, but it's a lot more tedious and a lot more annoying to do. And also, yeah, all you do, of course, its mobility is good, and you can escape certain situations, but it's awful against, like, single-target salmons. Like, it's awful against co-ops. It's okay against groups, okay against stingers. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, the dynamo is the worst weapon against the stinger, because the stinger, each for the rollers, you have to fling one each on the stinger. Dynamo, you can fling about 5 times, and they take a long time to fling. And it takes a crap ton of time for you to take out the stinger. Why would people enjoy the dynamo in Salmon Run if it takes a crap ton of time to take out a stinger with a horizontal or vertical fling on the stinger, if it only takes out one of the parts? I've rarely seen any rollers take out 2 parts at a time. I wish the rollers do that. Then it makes the dynamo a little bit better, because the Teddybear does take the thing out with 2 parts, and sometimes 3 as well. I've seen it before. But yeah, anyways, with the ink rush it's okay, but when I'm talking about like single DPS, you have to like follow your target. And also it runs out ink quite fast as well, for its lack of range and lack of damage. Its group damage is okay. Like, when I say okay, I mean like it's like Clash Blasters okay. But you have a lot less range as well. You have more mobility, because you can move around and run around with weapon, but it does very little things, besides helping you escape situations. But if you really wanted to kill something, or if you're getting overwhelmed, and you're low on ink, you have to be really careful, because if you spam the crap out of your ZR trigger, you're dead, because you run out ink really quickly. It's just really underpowered, pretty much. Dynamo's too slow, and it just doesn't have enough, like, killing power. It doesn't have good amount of pierce. The ink brush is really bad with DPS, especially for a close-range weapon, as it is right now. In normal game, it's better. Salmon Run, it's awful. Alright then. I think that's it. I'm done. 46 minutes of me talking about weapons you probably don't know, or onto a game you probably don't know. Well, Splatoon 2 weapons in Splatoon 2 Salmon Run. And this is my tier list. Tier maker, obviously. So yeah, S tier, A tier, B tier, C, D, E, F. Okay, so these are the weapons. These are all my opinion. These don't have to be your opinion at all. Your opinion could be different. So yeah, I'm done. I'm warm and sweaty because I've been working on this video for long enough. I thought it was going to take 20 minutes, twice as long now. My phone's about to die. Hope you guys enjoy the video, because this is all my opinion. I want to make this video since last night. So yeah, I just want to have my own opinion. And yeah, anyways, like and subscribe. You don't have to. And see you guys later. Bye-bye.